Hello and welcome. My name is Melissa Rebronja. I am an integrative healing practitioner at healyourheart.love. And today we'll be in conversation with Kelli Christine Case. Welcome, Kelli.
Thank you. Hi, Melissa. Glad
Hi.
to.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
excited to have you here. Kelli Christine Case is an inner relationship focusing practitioner like myself. You're also a grief ritualist and a 2-4 reflector. And I know that you are new to human design, but there is a reason why I thought we should talk about that as well. Because for those of you that are familiar with human design, you may know that reflectors are very rare. You are that, and we'll talk about that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
you're
Yeah.
welcome. So what is inner relationship focusing?
Yeah. I've been so many different ways that you can describe it.
Right.
Lately, I've been describing it as a process for sensing how your body is holding and living in the situations in your life so that fresh new steps can come.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
been my simple way of describing it. And there's like so much more that we could say.
Yeah. I learned this process about a year and a half ago, and I just fell in love with it because it felt like this therapy that a part of me was wanting all my life. Like I had
Mm.
this like inner sense, like someday, somewhere, there will be a space where I get to process
Mm.
everything that happened in my life. And I found that the focusing process is exactly that. So I've been doing it for my own personal practice on a regular basis, and I've introduced it to my own clients. You were referred to me by a classmate of mine because you were receiving your specific training with a different teacher, with the creator of inner relationship focusing, and we'll talk about that. And I loved being on the receiving end of your focusing sessions. I've always had this thing of like, be gentle with yourself. Like it would just be like a sentence that
Oh,
I
yeah.
say. And then when I came across inner relationship focusing, I'm like, oh my God, this is a step-by-step process of how to be gentle with yourself.
Yes, that's exactly. I like to say there's an almost like an overabundance online of what to do, like be gentle or have self-compassion and you want to heal your trauma and all that. But it's kind of, well, how do you do that? And inner relationship focusing to me is kind of like the HTML code of the how, like this is how.
And something that people I found are not aware of, it is a parts work model.
Yeah.
So, and I would say that it's right up there with internal family systems. I see internal family systems as a more masculine way of working with parts, inner relationship focusing, the more feminine way of working with parts.
Mm.
Yeah.
Do you mean like what does that refer to? Like the differences, feminine being more of that gentle kind of?
Well, yes, I was trained in inner relationship focusing, and then I dabbled in internal family systems. I took their 6-month online circle. And what I noticed is that there was an element of doing rather than just being with.
Yeah. Yes. There's a big part of the philosophy with inner relationship focusing is that um the way that change can come, that deep psychological and lasting change can happen is changing by not trying. Just that our inner process, what it needs the most is just our own simple company and presence in that somatic kind of way.
Yeah.
And that's what leads the inner life onwards.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your lineage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you were referring to my teacher, who is
Yes.
Ann Cornell. And also, I think you studied it with Maureen Gallagher, who I've
Yes.
also heard amazing things about.
Mhm.
Ann Cornell created inner relationship focusing with Barbara McGavin. And I've been studying with both of them for the past 3 or almost 4 years now. And Anne was a student of Eugene Gendlin, who created focusing. And she's I think like in her 70s now, and she met him when she was 22. And
Wow, that's amazing.
yeah, yeah. So she's been studying focusing and then developed it further. And Eugene Gendlin, for the people who don't know, was a philosopher first and foremost. And he wasn't like officially a psychologist, but he contributed a lot to the field of psychology. And he was a student and colleague of Carl Rogers, who's a pretty well-known psychologist who created the field of humanistic psychology and a lot of the parts work or Gestalt therapy, people refer to it. So I could say a lot more about Eugene Gendlin, but that's just a little bit about
Yeah.
who came before. Yeah.
I've heard you say before that it is hard to describe what focusing is, and you call yourself also an embodiment guide.
Yeah. Sometimes I wonder if that will connect with people better. Like they've heard that word embodiment and they're thinking, okay, it has to do with somehow being aware of sensing in my body.
Yeah, that makes sense. So tell me a little bit about the training.
Yeah, I just finished the actual 2-year training,
Amazing.
and I'm just
Congratulations.
at my very end. I'm teaching now my own little group of students the foundational learning how to do focusing. And a big part of focusing is partnership, where it's a very empowering way to do this method, because therapists and coaches and like professionals can do it, and that's what I've trained to do. But it's something focusing. Eugene Gendlin said, I can teach you focusing, but if in a year from now you still need me, I've done something wrong. It's really like
Ah,
yours.
ah,
So that's a way that people can actually have a practice of doing focusing, is learning to do it in partnership, so that it's you're trading with somebody else who is also not necessarily a practitioner, but you're able to companion each other. So
right. Yes. And
yeah.
that's a great way to learn and then later take that skill and use it with your clients. It can seamlessly be inserted into any modality, really.
Yeah, it's incredible how much it fits in with other methods and also spiritual practices. It's just amazing.
How did focusing come into your life?
I was working with my own really big life transitions and losses, and had some traumatic experiences. And so I was on a healing journey. Like I was seeking out every different like psychotherapy and life coaching and acupuncture and breath work and like
You've done it all.
everything, like medicine person I could find. And when I found an inner relationship focusing practitioner, and I hired her for like 6 sessions. And it was like on the third session that I just had this huge inner shift that felt like this
Ah,
big fresh air that came, and something that was stuck inside just moved along. And I just knew that there was so much potential in this. And I knew right then that I was ready to keep going with it. But I say that because it was like all these other cool things that I was practicing and working with. It was like after I started doing focusing, there was more room inside for all those other things to get in and like have an effect.
mhm.
I
Yeah.
knew that this was kind of like the missing link, like such a game changer.
I've done focusing with many different people, and I did sense that there was something different with you, and I wasn't sure if was it your training with Anne, because that was different, but there was this sense of just something was a little different. I can't put my finger on it. And then when I asked you about human design and we did your chart and you're a reflector, I had a thought, maybe that's what the difference is. And then the more I thought about it, because being a reflector means that all your centers are open. and that's what you have. And I feel that in some ways, the work that you do and you being a reflector is perfect. And it gives you like an extra edge.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, that's so interesting to me. For people who don't know, with inner relationship focusing, along with that kind of like gentle, the philosophy of just keeping company and being with, a big thing is just offering reflections back.
Yeah.
Like I'm as a companion or a guide, I'm just reflecting back what the focuser is saying that's coming in their process. And when I learned that I was a reflector and like a little bit about what that meant, that's what I thought too. Like it seems to fit so perfect with this kind of method. So I think that something on the energetics level is happening of being able to just reflect back to people exactly where they're at. So
Absolutely. And just to share for people that tuned in, just because you're a reflector,
yeah.
let's talk a little bit about what it is to be a reflector. So we mentioned openness, and then your aura, you have a sampling aura. So you're literally just sampling your environment and who's in front of you. So the big thing in human design is, what is your strategy and what is your authority? And they say that's the only two things that matter. Your strategy is waiting a lunar cycle.
Yeah. Make big decisions, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have no inner authority,
Mhm.
and you are checking in with how you feel, and that's how you make decisions.
Yeah. That inner like feeling sense of it all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I always envisioned reflectors to be very sensitive
Mhm.
and very gentle. And
Mhm.
just for contrast, I'm a manifestor, and then my strategy is to inform. So the way my energy body moves is I create impact wherever I go.
Mm.
So in order to create less resistance, I have to inform people of what I'm doing and why I'm there, and then people are going to relax and feel more comfortable.
Mm.
But my authority is emotional,
Mm.
which means that I have an emotional wave.
Mm.
So if you ask me to do something, I am to take time to ride my wave and then reply and be a yes or a no.
Mm.
So about 50% of the population are emotional and they have that wave. And then most of the people are generators and they're sacral. So they listen to their sacral authority
Mm.
and their gut will know what to do. And then yours is very unique. You just are sampling your environment and making decisions as you feel your way through. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, especially I've always been so sensitive to my environment and so
Mhm.
impacted by my environment. And that like checks out so much. I felt like so odd about growing up, like how aware I was of kind of like the emotional and energetics of my environment and how I grew up kind of I always say I kind of grew up in an intentional community. I have like I had four step siblings plus four older brothers. So there was kind of like a Brady Bunch house and all of the friends and everybody coming through. And I was I was the youngest but of the family, and I could kind of like I felt like it makes sense. Like, oh, I was the reflector. That's what I was doing. I was aware of that. And also my physical environment. Like I've always been so aware of like lighting and sights and smells. And so,
I definitely think it would be exciting for you to dive deeper into
yeah,
learning about human design and specifically your chart. And there's Facebook groups, and that helped me a lot as well. There's some really great groups to just connect with people that are your type and to learn more.
yeah, I'm excited to dive into that world. I feel like I'm right on the cusp of it.
That's awesome. I love that. I'd love to know more about being a grief ritualist. What does that mean?
Yeah. So along with on my own personal healing journey, focusing, which I'll just call it focusing for short, but it's really been interrelationship focusing that I've practiced the most. I've found community grief tending rituals, which I've participated in, and then I've really immersed myself with community that has practiced it, and I've learned from a couple different mentors who the specific lineage is with this as well comes from the Dagara people in Burkina Faso, which is in West Africa. And they're Sabon Fusome and Malidoma Some are more well known. And so some people listening might already know them, but they kind of were sent on a mission from their village to bring grief tending ritual to Americans. And it's so that's kind of what my journey has been. But what it's been for me is finding a community space where we can, it's this very similar thing. All of you is welcome. And it's very, you can be gently held and witnessed in the heavy things that you're carrying. And really that it's kind of like on the community piece, grief is the glue of community. It's kind of like the thing that we all actually share in common, even though we have individual differences in the stories of our lives and the particular forms that our losses take. That experience of being like brought to your knees is something that we all share. And in human history, there wasn't really we didn't have the actual physical infrastructure that we have now that's privatized our lives. And so now we kind of live with, we're all kind of carrying around our own private pain and our own heavy burdens. But it's the grief tending ritual gives us this space again where we can come together and be witnessed. And there's just something so transformative where instead of grief kind of recycling in your own body, there's a place to pour it out and let it be transmuted.
Wow, that sounds really amazing. And is it in person or is it online?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I first, it's just been a couple of years that I've been participating. So it was actually right at the beginning of the pandemic when I first got involved with this. And so for my first 6 months or so, I did everything online with a couple different mentors who I've connected with and learned from, and now are very close to in the Pacific Northwest. Yeah, so it turns out that it's actually was like a really nice small step to start by. It's such it can be really scary and have to be really vulnerable to really let your guard down and to really reveal the fullness of the anguish that we're often all privately carrying, and the like real fullness of maybe it's sorrow or fear or whatever these harder to carry emotions, like really letting yourself be seen in that. On Zoom can feel like a little step because yeah, it feels a little safer. There's kind of more and more people offering these around the world. So I have found that tending grief, so in our mainstream approach, psychological approach, is that grief is something that we need counseling for, and it's something that we want to hurry up and get over because we kind of have this like bright, sunny culture, like we want to just focus on things that are going well, and we're kind of like having this backpack of grief that we're not able to focus on. And this approach is all about actually coming into relationship with grief and letting it come through in your body. When something moves, it's because I'm sensing in this inner area of my body, just like when I'm focusing and I'm inviting the vocalization and the actual expression of the sounds that want to come through. And so this process of being with other people in community and tending grief, it's like the opposite of what happens when we're traumatized. It's like our psyches are getting the message, and our bodies on this body level, we're getting the message that I'm connected to myself and I'm connected to my community of people.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we'll grief rituals, hopefully outside if weather's permitting, on the landscape with there's water. And so my whole body gets the message that I'm connected to the earth and the cosmos and my people. And
Oh,
it's an
yeah.
incredibly healing method.
Yeah, it
So
sounds like. Thank you for sharing that. And when you say grief, is it a specific type of grief, like losing a loved one, or is it?
such a good question. Thank you for asking that. So a teacher who I've learned from, who also was a friend and I believe student of Malidoma Somé, his name is Francis Weller, and he wrote an incredible book called Wild Edge of Sorrow.
Hmm.
And in his book, he talked about what he calls 5 different gates to grief. And I'll say what those are, but the idea is that grief is kind of like it's less of like an emotion and more of like a faculty of the soul, or it's a place where you can go. And so there's can be different entry points, and losing someone you love or the loss, one of the first gate that he mentions that is most recognized in our society is that everything you love you will lose. So that's one gateway into grief.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can think of the gateways like tributaries, like rivers that are flowing into the
Mm.
ocean of grief, but it's
Mm.
really going into the ocean. And so he names others like, grief for the world, like that could
Yeah.
be our ecology and societal grief, and ancestral grief is another gate. So there's different ways of getting there, but there's really
Yeah.
so much medicine in coming into this. I'm actively, like, I'm tending my grief the way I would tend a garden. I'm in this active relationship with it. And that's a
Mm-hmm.
similar with inner relationship focusing. We're cultivating a relationship with what's inside.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Yeah, it's like it fits in with all this healing that is happening now, where we're just encouraging people to be more gentle with themselves and be with what is, and not have to change like that harsh, something's wrong with you and you need to change. It's more like, no, nothing's wrong with you. It's all natural and normal. You're a human being. You were affected, right? And meeting them there. It's like, so yeah, everything that you do fits in that
Yeah.
way of being with the healing journey. It reminds me of Joanna Macy's spiral work with
The work that reconnects
the
is
work
the
that
name of her.
reconnects. That's it. Oh,
Exactly. There's like a quote from her that I love. The heart that breaks open is the heart that can heal the world, the heart that loves
yes.
the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you. Who is your ideal client?
Well, it seems to be always changing the more that I'm working with new people and learning about who is naturally coming to me. I've found myself kind of naturally working with people who are moving through major life transitions and really processing deep grief.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
can take a lot of different forms. It can be somebody who's lost a loved one. I've seen people who moving through some form of pregnancy loss, whether that's abortion or miscarriage, and religious and faith transitions and divorce and breakups. So all these different ways that life can send us an earthquake.
Yeah. And what are the different ways that you work with people? So you do one-on-one sessions?
Yeah, so when I do a one-on-one session, I'm usually majority of the time what I'm doing is focusing with
Mm-hmm.
them,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm really following my sense of what they need in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so another method that I've really studied a lot and that I love is nonviolent communication.
Mm.
So a lot of times people think of that just as the kind of like a formulaic way of trying to express yourself in a difficult conflict in relationship with someone else. But actually, the principles with NVC can be really powerful when you're wanting to have some self reflection and get more awareness about what's going on in this relationship, in the ways that I feel connected or don't feel connected in my life with my people. A lot of times I'll also be using nonviolent communication with people.
Wonderful. And then you also are training people can work with you to learn interrelationship focusing.
Yeah. So it's just like a foundational focusing course. It's 9 weeks long, and you'll learn how to do focusing for yourself. But you're learning the philosophy of focusing, kind of how to go to that inner edge place where things aren't quite clear, and to invite something fresh to come in your life. And you'll also learn how to conduct a focusing partnership and how to also be a companion to somebody else who's focusing. And that can just allow you to do focusing partnership in your life. And if you're also a practitioner, then it can be the building blocks to eventually, like how you've done the training,
Yep.
be able to offer that with your clients.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Very cool. I love that. I just learned if you're open to talking about your spiritual background.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I grew up Mormon. I'm from Utah, and so I have Mormon pioneer ancestry on both sides for like 7 generations back. And I did the whole thing, the whole 9 yards. I was a proselytizing Mormon missionary.
Wow.
And I got married in the Mormon temple. And I went, when I was in college, I developed critical thinking skills, is kind of the story that I tell. And I started to look at Mormonism and realized that I didn't believe in it, and went through a faith transition. And it's been an ongoing journey now for like the last 9 years, of just opening up to everything else that humanity has, all the different wisdom traditions and spiritual traditions, and taking the best of, all of them, and kind of collecting all of my own different spiritual teachers. And so I think of focusing as kind of like I was saying, it fits with other healing methods, and it also fits with a lot of spiritual practices. It's like you don't have to believe in any certain thing to do focusing or practice focusing, but it fits so well with all the different spiritual traditions that I have most deeply connected with.
Yeah,
So,
that's very cool. And so what would you consider yourself now? You're not a Mormon anymore.
well, I've been looking at Mormonism more as like an ethnicity or a heritage, because it's so rich culturally.
Right.
So I've kind of been on this journey of reclaiming that aspect. Like, I'm a Mormon in a lot of ways, but I'm
Oh,
not obviously
interesting.
an active.
Like when people say I'm a non-practicing Jew, you're like a non-practicing Mormon. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's super similar. I'm not a member of the Mormon church anymore, and I'm definitely, don't believe in it in a literal way. But I acknowledge that part of what made me me.
Yeah.
But I identify a lot more now as a mystic, meaning referring to the mystery of how are we all here, and like finding a lot of spiritual connection in the awe and the wonder and the mystery of so much that I don't know,
Right.
and I don't
Yeah.
need to know it all.
Right, right. That's cool. Anything else that you'd like to share for people to know about you?
Um, if you're interested in working with me, my website is kellychristinecase.com. And if anything I said today resonates, feel free to reach out. The way to start working with me is just scheduling a 15-minute chat. And there's usually a link on like every page of my website where you can schedule that. And I'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. I love that. And I highly recommend people check you out. And thank you, Kelly. This was a wonderful interview. Hoping to have you back for more. Thank you for
Thank
watching,
you.
everyone. Yeah.